Welcome back to the Bruderhof YouTube channel, where we are reading through, following the call, living the Sermon on the Mount together. We are on chapter 33, God's Will. And the verse in question today is Matthew 6:10. Your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. And in this chapter has to be one of my favorite readings from the mystic Meister Eckhart, which I've turned to many times. Because it is just such a crucial and important insight into our will and God's will.
Yes. He really makes that distinction very clear, which is helpful.
The first sentence, nothing makes a true man but the giving up of his will. Very simple statement, but so profound. We have to let go of what we want in order for God to be able to do his will in our lives.
Yeah.
And that can cost a battle.
For sure.
And yet, he writes, actually one of the later people writes, this is not something that should cause us to become cramped. Right. It should be a surrender. Mm-hmm. And surrender basically just, in my view, means, what it is laying down your arms, just letting go. And then what Jesus tells us in Matthew 11:28, my yoke is easy, my burden is light, then it becomes true if we are able to surrender in that way.
Well, and I think it's also encouraging that some of the authors here also point out that this is a battle and it kind of involves a lot of turmoil. So to me, that kind of got me thinking, like, there has to be something in that is of God, like that human struggle that we have to let go and lay down our wills is an active thing. It's not a passive thing. And there's something beautiful in that victory over that fight, that battle, to surrender to God's will. And I think here he talks about how also it's that longing, Lord, show me what is thy dearest will and give me strength to do it. Because it involves great strength and absolute humility, which is so counterintuitive to all of us, I think.
Well, Jesus himself had to struggle in the Garden of Gethsemane to surrender himself to the Father's will, which was, for him, death. Mm-hmm. For us, it will mean maybe death of different hopes or longings, or in and of themselves, maybe they were good hopes and longings. But we still have to surrender. And Meister Eckhart writes, and I love this sentence or sentences, we deafen God day and night with our words, Lord, thy will be done. But when God's will does happen, we are furious and don't like it a bit. When our will becomes God's will, that is certainly good. But how much better would it be if God's will were to become our will? And later, God needs nothing more from us than a quiet heart.
Yeah. What do you think is meant when our will becomes God's will? That is certainly good. But how much better it would be if God's will were to become our will. Because for me, I was thinking about that when I read it. Like, how do we know? How can we presume to know what God's will is? And is that like surrender, or is that like an active thing to seek that?
I think it's acceptance of what God sends. Meister Eckhart later writes, this is man's perfection, to be detached from and stripped of everything created, to conduct oneself uniformly in everything and toward everything, to be neither broken by misfortune nor puffed up by good fortune, not to feel greater joy about this than about that, neither greater joy nor greater fear. And I think that's the mystery of the surrender. Like, yes. So, I could get a cancer diagnosis tomorrow, right? Mm-hmm. And I should face that with the same equanimity and surrender as if I were to, win the lottery. Mm-hmm. These things, these outward things, shouldn't take our eyes off what's most important, which is doing God's will, which we know what that is, right? We're taught in the Bible what God's will is. Mm-hmm. He teaches us how to live. and then we accept
Yeah.
what comes our way.
Yeah. And that kind of aligns with what Robert McAfee Brown says here about how when we pray, it's Our Father who art in heaven, and then stay there. We can cope with a God who is sequestered in some corner of heaven, or even center stage, but far off, which is where we like our gods to be, safely removed from our dwelling place and therefore no threat to us. Because it is disruptive to our life continuum.
Yeah.
And how we would like to see it play out.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, that's really challenging.
Very, very many good thoughts in here, and challenging, yet at the same time simple and encouraging.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's also it directly connects to why we live in community and why we help each other seek that every day, because doing that is complete surrender to God's will, and it's often quite challenging in that context as well. So
yeah,
I think it directly relates to what both of us have committed our lives to as well.
Well, and you also do realize over time that with practice, it becomes easier. For me, the initial laying down of will caused a tremendous struggle, but every successive need to do that, and it's not like you make a one-time decision and it's over. Every successive time where something comes up and you realize, okay, I really have to let go of this, it does become easier to do over time, and that should be an encouragement to anyone, especially when you're young. I think it's probably a harder fight to fight, because self-will and self-determination rise up, and you want to self-actualize, and we're all very influenced by the culture around us.
Perhaps, but there's also some pretty cantankerous and stubborn old people.
Well, I hope to not be one of those.
Yeah. No, it's very true. It is challenging when you feel like you have your whole life before you, but in actual fact, you do not know what God's will is for your life. So it's surrendering to that.
Well, I think that's probably good for this. And I was admonished by a viewer last time in the last video in the comments in the last video, that we should engage more in the comments in the discussion. We promise to, dive in the comment section and mix it up with you all, our faithful viewers. We appreciate you. So we'll see you next week.